Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to share with you my guest appearance on the Quinton Sanicola Show. Quinton and I met at a Dr. Joe Dispenza event. As you know, I've done a lot of them, and I love what the process does for me and others. Quinton is an entrepreneur. He's lived much of his life in Japan. He's married to a Japanese woman, and we took a deep dive into the power of the subconscious mind, what we can accomplish quickly and easily by having access to the blind spots that we normally get taken out of life with, the pain, the suffering, the limitations, and how quickly and easily those can vanish. Here's my interview with Quinton Sanicola.
This is the serendipity that goes along Joe's events.
Absolutely.
Right. So that's actually where we met, was
Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Dr. Joe Dispenza's Nashville 7-day retreat. I heard about it for years, just wasn't in the cards, didn't get to pull the trigger, and was like, I'm going to this one. Heard all about it from everyone. And lo and behold, now it makes sense to me. So how many events have you been to?
That was my 9th.
Okay, 9. So I'm going to ask a question that I asked hundreds of times when I was there. Why 9? By the way, preface, this is not going to be a Joe Dispenza advertisement. No. I promise. But why 9?
That's okay. My viewers and my clients are very used to hearing about Dr. Joe because I'm so impressed with what he's done with all the data.
Okay.
I love mysticism and real world coming together, which I'm very excited about. So when people go to these events, they literally don't come back the same person. Their microbiome has changed. I was in his microbiome study 2 years ago, and they've proven that you're not physiologically the same person, and they're measuring all kinds of things: breast milk, blood, brain patterns, and just over and over again, people are getting these crazy great results. So I'm a results person. I like to see people up-leveling their life quickly and relatively easily.
So for you, it's like a check-in, I think, right?
Well, I always like to say it's like pulling my car into the gas station and getting topped off. So when you're around 2,000 amazingly cool people like yourself, I mean, I wouldn't have met you otherwise.
Thank you. Yeah.
But every time I go, I meet a handful of just people that I end up staying in touch with for a long time. There's amazing people from all over the world, about 2,000 people. And when you're meditating for that many hours with that many people, the energy in the room is just magnificent. And it feels so good. And again, the health outcomes, because the scientists are just gobstruck. They say there's no drug, that does even a third of what this is doing. It has none of the side effects. In movies like The Source, which Joe has put out recently, people are able to understand and learn how this stuff works.
That was the big thing for me. I think I've told the story before, but here's a really short version. I read this book about how to buy businesses. It's a book no one's ever heard of. The Dirty Little Secrets of How to Buy a Business No One Wants to Tell You. I reach out to the author. Lo and behold, he responds to me. While I'm talking to him, I asked for 3 books. Always ask this question. It is entirely for selfish reasons. One of the books, he's like, you have to read Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Now, I had already finished the book. I had dove into his work and done his meditations. So I'm like, I'm in that honeymoon high phase of I'm passing it to everyone. So this guy who's done hundreds of millions in revenue bought 57 businesses at the time. He even corrected me and said it was higher then, so it's probably even more now. In other words, this very down-to-earth, non-woo-woo person is like, I recommend his book more than my book. It made me go, okay, I knew I stumbled on something and I was in the honeymoon high. Tell me more.
The title of the book alone is brilliant because I help people for 23 years. I help people with acupuncture and nutritional medicine. Then I found I'm really good at helping people go into their subconscious mind and just rewiring what it is that's stuck. The subconscious mind is many, many times what the conscious mind is. It's 5% compared to 95%. It's 40 bits of information compared to 40 million bits of information. So when you can help somebody find what their biggest block is in their subconscious mind and rewire that, then the results are just spectacular.
So one of the hurdles is breaking the habit of being yourself. So if you're firing and wiring the same, neurological pathways,
Mhm.
the same clear thought and strong emotion, usually a negative one. If you picked it up somewhere between the ages of 2 and 10 and it's getting in your way, it's probably something like, other people deserve success. I don't. I'm not
Mm.
worthy. Relief is available to other people. It's not available to me. Some story that we made up about some situation that haunts us. And when we can break that habit of being ourselves, and it takes a willingness. I would say the only people that really, statistically, I feel like 95% of the people that are doing my work get 50 to 100% of their outcomes in 3 sessions. The people that struggle are the ones that aren't willing to break the habit of being themselves.
Is that a letting go, or what is
Well, it's
that?
almost like an addiction, and Dr. Joe talks about
Mm.
this. If you're constantly beating yourself up, if you have a story that you're not worth it,
Mhm.
and you're going to just cling to that story no matter what, or if you think you made a mistake in your past and you're just going to hang on to that version of reality no matter what, you're not going to allow for the possibility that maybe you are worth it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or if you're not going to allow for the possibility that, oh, maybe that was supposed to happen so I could get bigger and move on to better things. But if you're so committed to the old story, the subconscious mind prefers a familiar hell to an unfamiliar heaven. So the key is to make the unfamiliar hell, the familiar hell unfamiliar, and make that unfamiliar heaven
Mm.
familiar. And that's like learning a new language. It's like going to the gym when your muscles aren't that strong. It's not super complicated, but it does take that commitment. So you have to just realize that, okay, in order to get to where I want to be, I'm going to become a new person.
Mm.
I'm going to be willing
Literally become a new person. Okay.
and I'm going to be willing to let go of the old me. That's not a bad thing. It's
Mm.
like when a butterfly comes out of its cocoon, it doesn't go, gee, I want to go back to being a caterpillar.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
being willing to shed the old you.
Mm.
And the caterpillar analogy is really perfect because when a caterpillar is changing, it kind of becomes this imaginal soup.
Mm.
It becomes kind of mush as it's giving up to the wisdom of the universe and becoming this butterfly.
Mm.
So we all, I believe, have that within us, and
Mm.
I've seen it over and over and over again, and it's so exciting when you dump the old patterns, dump the habit of being your old self. Joe has a famous meditation called changing boxes where you
Mm.
just kind of
Mm.
you recognize, oh, okay, this is the old me, this is the old familiar pattern, and I'm changing and I'm going to this new familiar pattern, and you start to associate positive feelings to that, and then you can become addicted to the new you rather than the old you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Hey guys, studies are showing that 68% of people that watch podcasts regularly don't click the subscribe button. Do me a huge favor. If you like this content, click subscribe so other people know where to go for the cool stuff. Thank you.
Changing boxes and what is it? The blessing of the energy centers
Mhm.
are the two meditations that I've been doing his work for a long time. Never had the opportunity to go to his seminar, as I said, but I am very future pacing, right? I'm very much so in setting an intention on I want this outcome or I want that. Whereas changing boxes does a little bit of that, but specifically, blessing of the energy centers is much more about being present. It's not as much like imagine this or step into those shoes or anything like that. Those are the two that, for lack of better words, I kind of avoided. I don't know how to explain that, but I
And that's
wouldn't
okay,
volunteer to do it,
because
and now I do.
people say, which is the best meditation? Whatever meditation works for you, whichever one
Mm,
you gravitate to.
mm,
Those do work rather differently.
mm,
Blessing of the energy centers, you're just giving your love and your energy and your light
yeah.
to your energy centers, and they respond.
And that's one of since then, I think it's been about 2.5 weeks since his event, I've been doing daily. Just because somebody had said to me, like, it came up in conversation and I shared that with him and I just told him it just happens to be and it's not a dislike. It's just if I scrolled through and I was like, which one do I feel like I could do? Conveniently, it was never that one. Right. And there's also some of the variations that have the breath work and there was 100, and you're like, I don't really, it's early. I don't want to do that. Right. There's a whole, ball of wax behind it. But for me now, somebody said something, one of the amazing people that I met, which are a lot, such as yourself. She's like, that's probably the one that you're avoiding, and there's probably a reason behind it. You should probably try that. And since then, I've been doing that almost on a daily basis, and I've really come to enjoy and love that. Right. So to even say to someone that there's a possibility of meditating for between 45 minutes and 2 hours on a daily basis sounds, one, terrible, two, horrifying, three, not going to do it. Like I couldn't do it. I'm incapable of doing it. Right. How did you get into this world? Like me and you clicked pretty quickly when we met, either at breakfast or lunch, on a few topics, and maybe some of them we'll cover and maybe some of them we'll avoid. Wink, wink. So how did you, like, what brought you into this?
Such a great question. So I had my office in Beverly Hills at the time. A patient of mine landed at LAX. She texted me from the airport. She says, I just spent 5 hours next to Joe Dispenza. And I didn't know who he was. I'm like, kind of familiar name. Anyway, I went to the internet, looked him up, and I thought, oh, wow, this guy's incredible. You read about his injury. He fractures every one of his lumbar vertebrae. He's a black belt. He's also a leading sports chiropractor. He knew that meant a lifetime of immobility and pain if he were to do the only medical treatment available for that, which was Harrington rods. So he refuses the surgery, which is unheard of.
Yeah, that's like a death sentence, right? For your
One
walking
would
ability.
have thought.
Yeah,
I mean, he had a series of well-known orthopedists saying, you can't do anything but get Harrington rods. But he didn't want that outcome, so he refuses the surgery. And with his buddies, a swimming pool, not allowing himself a single negative thought, only eating the most nutritious foods, he creates that future, that reality where he's healed. And he does it. And then he considers it the best thing that ever happened to him because now he helps people raise their heart and brain coherence. And he's measuring all of this stuff. And so he has this wonderful saying that science is the modern day language of mysticism. So it's coming out of woo-woo, even though people throughout history have done miraculous healings using their mind. He's now taking it out of that realm and putting it in the realm of really solid science. So they're doing double blind, triple blind, quadruple blinding testing, and they're coming up with data that's so impressive, it's now getting published in the leading journals.
So you're introduced, your friend says, check this out.
So I read all of his books. I start telling
Okay.
my people about him. I start doing the meditations, but it took me a long time to get to his retreats like you. I mean, you had been
Really?
doing the work for years.
Yes, I was.
So, I mean, literally, I don't know, almost a decade had passed. And finally,
wow.
I ended up at one of his live events in Marco Island a little over 2 years ago and loved it.
So your first one was 2 years ago, and you've been to 9.
Yeah.
So you like dove in.
Again, I don't see what the downside is.
It's fair, because I've heard that so many times that you're right? What's the downside, right? So, okay.
Yeah.
That's 9 events. That's what?
It's about 3 to 4 a year.
Okay. And is that something that you want to keep up in that way?
You know what? I don't know. I've kind of, like you, it's like I just leave it open to the universe. If the universe, God says, go do it, then I do it. And if God and the universe says, okay, you're kind of saturated on that and it's now time to move something else, then I'll do that.
Okay. So I've never covered Joe's work. I've talked about him and his books quite a bit. If you want to like dive in more, you can find him everywhere. You can find his interviews everywhere. You can find more, even about Dr. Tara here. You can find a lot more of their answers, traditional answers, and other interviews and different things like that. So definitely go check them out. But I don't want to steal my time with Dr. Tara talking about Joe, right? But that just happened to be where we had met, right?
Yeah,
So-
and he really is rocking the world with this data, and I think it's important for people to know it.
True.
In my work, I want people to get from point A to point B as quickly and as easily and efficiently as possible, and that is one tool that I highly recommend to people because it augments the individual one-on-one work that I do so well. Now, I would say probably 50% of the people I'm working with are doing that simultaneously. 50% aren't. They all get great outcomes for the most part. But again, because it's just one of the, I mean, I recommend exercise and being out in nature and drinking healthy water and eating healthy food. I mean, there's just certain basics to getting through life effectively, and that's part of it.
For you, you know, so one of the things that caught my attention is I live in Japan, of course, everybody does, right? Live in Okinawa right now. Um, it's much more common. So, as an example, friends of mine were going through some fertility issues. Going to do acupuncture is much less socially ostracized. It's not this fringe thing that you're going to
Oh,
do
it's
on the
not
outside.
fringe here anymore.
Good. So I've been gone for a minute. So walk me through this here. How did you even get into acupuncture in the first place?
Another good story. I was in the entertainment business after college. I spent 5 years in various phases of that: production, development, acquisitions. I spent the last 2 years at the leading talent agency,
Okay.
which people would give their left arm to be at. We had lawyers from Stanford and Harvard working in the mailroom for minimum wage because they just wanted to get their foot in the door. And I had, by being there for 2 years, two of the top guys wanted me to work for them. And at that point, I was feeling I was suffocating. I felt like I couldn't breathe. And so I called up my homeopath and I said, what would I do if I want to do what you do? Because I was really impressed with how he helped people. And when he gave me the answer, it's like God parted the clouds and said, this is what you're going to go do. It was really a weird epiphany. And people thought I was nuts because here I was leaving the place that everybody wanted to be at. After that, people would come in from that environment and say, oh, you're so lucky you got out.
It's funny how that works, right? Yeah.
But and I haven't looked back. I mean, there was times that I thought, gosh, was I crazy? But for the most part, it was very satisfying to my soul to be able to have some intervention in somebody's life, whether it was nutrition, acupuncture, meditation, energy work, whatever that was, that just dramatically took them from where they were to a much more free, healthy way of living. That is how I got into. And then I went to China for a year and studied at one of the top 5 traditional Chinese medical hospitals. So as another person who's been implanted into the Asian culture, it's a great experience. I think every American should go experience another culture because we're a little cultural centric here.
More Americans than anyone, I would say. And I don't know if that's necessarily. I think it's actually a combination of obviously the natural barriers of the oceans, but also we have this tendency to isolate ourselves for better or for worse. And that applies to even some of the crazy. Nobody wakes up in the morning and it's like, oh, it's super normal today, right? Like some of the crazy situations happening worldwide, it's the same thing where we have a tendency to feel that we are separate from. Versus like no. These things on the other side of the oceans are going to affect us, and they are affecting us whether we can consciously perceive it or not, right? So if you wanted to experience another culture, I would say Asian culture in particular is so different, right? I think we talked about Spanish, right? Like your brain processes it, you don't understand necessarily, but you kind of grasp, right? When you're talking about Mandarin or when you're talking about Japanese, it's so different that you can't even process or comprehend.
Well, what is really interesting, because I didn't go there as a young person, we did go with 2 young people, and they, of course, learned it way faster than we did. They were making fun of our accents after a year. They're like laughing at us. But it's really, to me, it's a welcome thing when you can stretch your bubble of perception and see things in a different way. The poverty in China was really immense when I was there. The average person made like $300 a year. It was really a lot, not a lot.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and as I was teaching English, and because I was a foreigner, things cost more. So I got paid 4 times what the average university teacher got paid.
Wow.
Which was $1.25 an hour. I mean,
it's just like, wow, fallen, right?
and so, but it was just so, again, like you're talking about, it's another world. I mean, I saw people going up and down the sides of a mountain with a bag of rocks on their back for a bowl of rice a day, barefoot. And when you see that, when you have that perspective, I mean, I saw toilets that looked like they were out of Stephen King novels. You just get a reality check that, the the world isn't all America. And when I came back, when you hear somebody complaining because they have to wait for 10 minutes in a Starbucks line, it's like,
But you have Starbucks, right? Yeah.
it's
Right.
like, these are first world problems.
Yeah.
And I really think we should have an experience of what so many other, so just to have basic humility
Yeah. And also recognize what we do have.
and appreciate it.
Yeah. It can get worse, like a lot.
Oh, and it could get worse so fast if we just don't pay attention to basics
And it seems like we aren't in a lot of different ways.
in a
which,
lot of different ways. And I think part of the thing is that we're falling prey to this polarization. And we all know from algorithms that it's not hard to just figure out who's on 50% of one equation and 50% on another. And you can have two groups that both think they're fighting for the good guys and they hate each other.
Yeah. I heard a good quote the other day.
But who wins in that situation when
Nobody.
I saw this great GIF. It's a king on a balcony with his advisor looking out, and the townspeople are coming with pitchforks and with torches.
Yeah.
And the king's sweating bullets, and the advisor just leans over and says, "Oh, sire, you don't have to fight them. You just have to convince that the people with the torches, that the people with the pitchforks want to take their torches away."
And it's where we are today. I mean, pretty much worldwide. So
I did interview a wonderful man named Dr. Ming Wang, and he escaped the Cultural Revolution.
who actually I've been to his doctor's office.
There you
We
go.
talked about that, right?
There you go.
He's worked. Yeah.
And he came out with a movie called Sight, and he said people who most appreciate their vision are people who didn't have it, because he's restored vision and
His whole life.
yeah, and he's had the immense gratification of being able to do that. But he says people who appreciate freedom are the most are the people that have not had it. And he grew up at a time where there was a lot of cultural craziness. When he was at a university and the Red Guard was storming, they broke, I think, 32 of his mother's bones, and she spent 2 years in bed, being tended to before she was able to walk again. Things can get really nutty when people have, and these by people that they didn't even know. I mean, for no reason other than
You're the bad guys.
you have
right?
stuff
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we want stuff, and you must be bad because you've got stuff,
Yeah.
and you have an education we don't. So yeah, it can get nutty quickly if we don't. His whole push is to come together on common ground because statistically, I think we all agree on 86% of stuff.
Oh yeah, if not more, right? So let me ask you then, in terms of your work and Joe's work, I think obviously there's a polarization. I mean, obviously politically, but also in the spiritual sense, right? In an education sense, in multiple senses, I think people are really becoming aware, more or less, right? So for Joe in particular, and again, the only reason why I'm bringing it up is because we happen to just be there. But he's talking about like transform so that you can transform the world, right? Like that's kind of his motto, more or less. Where do you see this going? Because I do see such a polarization, both negative and the positive. And I say the positive gets highlighted less, but it's out there. And there's some people really getting involved, really want to see the positive change, really looking inward for the change, right? And trying to get a message out there, not in a guru sense, but like we actually can change the world for the better sense, if that makes sense.
So when he did the Walk for the World, there was over 140,000 people involved with that.
Which is wild, by the way.
And it literally affected the Schumann resonance. So
You're the first person to mention that. I was going to ask if it did it because him and Greg Braden are connected, and Greg is one of the guys that highlighted 9/11
and there's all kinds of studies that have been done. It doesn't take David Hawkins was very into this work too. I love David Hawkins. He wrote Power versus Force, and his last book was called Letting Go, which is one of my favorite books of all time. But it just takes a significant minority of people to raise the vibration, raise the consciousness. And Dr. Joe is doing it by just, you go into nothing, no place, nowhere, nobody, and no time. And then when you're very coherent, that coherence has a lot of power to it. And when you have a positive thought in that level of coherence, the ability for that to manifest is stronger and faster than if you're just working matter to matter.
So they measured the change with the people walking.
With the Schumann resonance, yeah, it was. I don't know who measures it, but they did show the graphs.
What is a Schumann resonance? Quickly, we can
It's the
explain that,
resonance
yeah.
of the Earth, and I'm not a big expert on this, but
yeah.
I do know that they've looked at it in times where people have come together on common things, like when 9/11 happened. There was this compassion and the outpouring from the world, and
So you're talking about literally the electromagnetic field that everyone knows surrounds the Earth was altered through the thoughts. Literally, I don't know. It sounds a weird way to say
from
it. But,
coming together and being on the same page in a really positive way.
okay. And as of 9/11, my understanding with Greg Braden was it was a negative way. It was like that was when the images were spread.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, I'm not a Schumann
Understood. Yeah,
expert, but the world did respond with a spike in the Schumann resonance. And I don't know if it was the negative effect of the incident happening or whether it was the positive effect of people coming together.
Yeah.
And being just, wanting to unite in a positive way after that.
That's magical. I was trying to find anyone who knew.
Heart
if
math
it
is the one
changed.
that I think
Okay.
is really, I think that's a good resource for that.
That's so wild. So in terms of acupuncture, do you see the same thing? So he talks about, I mean, there's different words for this stuff, right? There's like chakras or energy centers, which were considered a more of a woo-woo, but with neurology and the way it's progressing so fast, we're now seeing literal mini brains,
Yep.
right? Acupuncture and your expertise for decades. Have you seen this as well?
We referred to it as meridians and
Okay.
chi energy, and it's the flow. I mean, like I can't tell you how many people I've treated who, I put my hands on them and I just go exactly to the spot that has been bothering them, and they're like, "How did you know that was there?" And it's almost like you just kind of get radar after a while. You kind of just go to wherever that person's stuck energy is, and that's handy because then you put needles in that help free that up, and it just makes the whole process happen beautifully. I think all of us have the ability to do this. It's just that we spend so much time looking at billboards and being in our car and listening to the
Cell
radio.
phones.
Yeah, and we just get distracted and we don't cultivate this. But like the Shaolin monks, they could sit in the snow and meditate, and the snow would melt all around them, and they were trained to that. People ask me how acupuncture, got started in the first place. Some people think it was just accident where somebody got a splinter in a acupuncture point and their back pain went away. I don't think that's. I think people like the Shaolin monks could see the energy and they just knew how to manipulate it, and they noticed that in these particular points the energy pools, and they could feel it. And when somebody was ill, they could feel that the energy was stuck there. They stick a needle in it, it starts to flow properly. The person starts to feel better, and so they just mapped all this stuff out.
Just over time.
Yeah, and those are areas of high electrical conductivity.
So it's just different vocabulary for similar.
And for example, if somebody's got a problem in Western medicine, sometimes they'll get a nerve conduction velocity test, which is putting in two needles and measuring the speed of the signal from one to another. Well, the Chinese were doing this with acupuncture, understanding that there was a blockage in that meridian, that pathway, and that in order for that person to experience health and wellness, that pathway had to get opened up.
How do you open those up?
Acupuncture.
Okay.
Or Qigong is another way. So when
Qigong,
people are doing Tai Chi, or if you have a Tai Chi master who's actually, talented and skilled at this, they can move the energy for you.
Okay. Do you have to be very careful with that about who?
Well, I think yes.
Chi?
Well,
I don't know another way to say that.
Okay, so I have often said that it's not like a physical manipulation like a chiropractor. So if you see somebody who's really not good at chiropractic and they manipulate you, that can. Whereas if you see somebody with acupuncture that's not great at it, I mean,
Johnny's walking funny, yeah. Right?
well, I do know somebody actually that was quite damaged by a bad adjustment, which doesn't happen a lot. I mean, statistically, there's tons of great chiropractors out there. They're worth their weight in platinum. So, no diss on that. But if you see somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, the acupuncture likely it's just not going to do anything. I mean, I suppose if they had really nasty bad energy, but that's true of just a person in general.
Fair. Yeah. Right.
Energy vampires.
That's real.
And trust me, I had a patient come in that story I'm not going to go into. I have told it before, but if you're around somebody with really, really nasty negative energy, it can be not good.
Contagious.
Well, it can wreak some havoc.
So
And that's not to, I'm very much just you build up your energy, you be in a positive space, and none of that stuff will affect you.
so pretty across the board. Just take care of yourself, eat right, right?
Eat right,
General
think right,
exercise,
treat people right, think good thoughts, say good things.
and let it build momentum.
Raise your vibration and then your ability. And again, Dr. Joe's studying this. They're looking at the blood of people who don't meditate at all, people that meditate somewhat, some people that advanced meditators, and then they expose them to COVID. And the COVID went right in the non-meditators. It sort of hung around the outside of the novice meditators, and the advanced meditators, it just didn't go anywhere near into the cell.
This protein is Serpent A5. I'm not that smart. I just happened to watch the documentary.
So they tested and they knew the phenomena was occurring, and then they found out exactly what the protein was. And again, this is, ultra well conducted studies that have p values that are super great, and these are getting now published in major journals.
That's the probably the most wild thing about it is when you go to a seminar like that. It's kind of one of those seminar. There are certain circles you don't even share what it is, right? It's just one of those things. But it's very different when Joe, or anyone for that matter, is able to sit up there and to say, what I used to have to refer legally to pseudoscience is no longer pseudoscience, and I am legally allowed to say X, Y, and Z because it's not me. Now it's the data. There's something in my eye here. There's something special about that. And I could only imagine how everyone said that his events are different, but how they have evolved as the data and as the science has evolved. And I'm sure you've seen that as well.
Well, that's the other thing why I've gone to 9 events, because there's usually something new about each event, and they've got some other study that they've done that's fascinating.
For you, what was the jump that took you into hypnotherapy from acupuncture?
Another great question. So a patient of mine was coming in, and she had a horrible trauma background. She was raving about the stuff she was doing, and when I found out it was based in hypnosis, I said, okay, I want to meet your person. And I did a trade with that person. I had seen 2 of the top hypnotists in Los Angeles. I have great respect for them. They're knowledgeable people. The hypnosis itself did not rock my world. This rocked my world. This was different. This was a more unique, efficient way to bypass the subconscious mind, at least in my experience, and having worked with so many people now, helping them get past whatever their big block is. I went and trained live with Marissa Peer. I did hundreds of hours of Dr. Joe because truth is truth is truth. When you start to understand, okay, this is how the subconscious mind works, this is how the brain works, this is how all this stuff works, then it just starts to become more second nature. You start to see what's tripping people up. And what's crazy is it doesn't matter so much what happens to us. It's our belief about ourself, the world, and other people. That's the thing that trips us up. So it's our belief. And right in the middle of the word belief is the word
lie.
Yeah. So many people are suffering because they're hanging on to some lie in the past, and so often it's not even within our awareness. So by talking somebody down into a relaxed state, I call it Googling the subconscious mind. You're using the emotions to find out what got stuck in there. When did it get stuck in there? What does that energy want and need? It's usually some form of, desperation, not feeling good enough, not feeling up to the task, feeling threatened in some way. So again, a message gets through that says, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, other people deserve it, good things I don't. Whatever that fake belief is can be worked with and upgraded. I always say people are like an iPhone 16 operating on iPhone 4 technology. And it really is that simple to rewire that, put in new programming. So when I'm done working with somebody, a pattern has become clear. I create them an audio tape that they listen to each and every night as they drift off to sleep to fire and wire the neural pathways that they do want. And the old ones that no longer serve them can be pruned off and dry up and blown away.
Do you find that, so you said most people have fantastic results unless you're not willing to put to death the
Yeah,
old
the
self.
very few percentage of people that just won't let go of their old story.
And why though? So I want to go back to that just a little bit. Like, is it just like a reluctancy? Because it's like, don't think of pink elephants. Like, you know what I mean?
I use that all the time in my work, by the way.
Okay, so
all the time.
It's the same thing. Or it's like, that joke where you're like, oh, settle down. I just want to be calm. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
It's like
so
the George Costanza character.
Exactly.
What did he say?
100%.
Serenity now.
Yeah,
Serenity now.
It's like 100%, right? And there's like an element of that, right? Because you even mentioned with beliefs, the lie.
Well, like if somebody is a worrier and they say, okay, I need not to worry. I don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, don't be anxious. It's again, don't think of a pink elephant, don't think of a pink elephant.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't think of,
Yeah.
So you have to replace that with something that's other than that.
So it's swapping it out.
But it's, again, it's very strategic. It's like if that person's having an emotion and a neurological pattern that's going on, you need to find out what that is. And then, okay, what is it trying to accomplish? And then, I'm not accomplishing that as an iPhone 4. If I was the iPhone 16 that I currently am, then I could do that. But any change is uncomfortable. So there has to be that commitment to change, that willingness to stop being the old you, because there's the cortisol, there's the adrenaline, there's the whatever, feeling the shame, feeling the blame, that there's a payoff to that. So you do have to be willing to let that go and become that other person, which just by definition, because it's different, has a level of discomfort. I worked with a gal once that had lifelong anxiety. She called me up the day after the first session. She says, I feel like I'm high. Am I supposed to feel this way? And I said, yeah, that's what it feels like to not be anxious all the time.
It's like normal life. Yeah.
So again, just because the unfamiliar is uncomfortable at first, you just have to be desirous of that and celebratory of it. So once you go, oh, wow, this is what it feels like to be relaxed, even though it's uncomfortable, just celebrate the fact that it's happening, because then your brain gets the message, oh, okay, this is what he wants. This is what she wants. She wants more of this stuff and not that old stuff.
Okay. And it's trying to solve a problem, but it's just going about it the wrong way.
Well, again, 90 to 99% of our mind is subconscious, which is by definition below the level of consciousness. So trying to solve a problem with 5 to 10% of your brain for most people is pretty futile.
So practicality wise, like what are some of the frameworks that you would ensue to get in there, right? So you had mentioned a relaxed state, right? So you walk them through.
Yeah, so
settling
I give
down,
people a
calming.
practice audio, very, very simple. Anybody that's advanced meditator or just, is all used to getting into alpha won't have any difficulty. I mean, it's just a natural state. You're watching television, you're in alpha, you're focusing on something, you're meditating, you're relaxed, you're drifting in and out of sleep, you're in alpha or that high theta, and that's trainable. God knows we did a almost 5-hour meditation. You're already really good at this.
Yeah.
So you talk somebody into that relaxed state, and then you start asking questions that, again, target when did this get installed? Why did it get installed? How did it get installed? What does it need? What does it want? And then it can get what it needs as an iPhone 16 rather than an iPhone 4. Imagine a child who's being traumatized. Parents are fighting. They can't do anything. Pick whatever traumatic event a child might go through. What are they going to do? They're going to clench their teeth. So sometimes they get people who, have TMJ that have tried everything and hasn't resolved it. And people with migraine headaches. Again, that neck and shoulder tension. What is a kid going to do? It's going to tense up.
Yeah.
And those patterns can fire and wire throughout the course of a lifetime. I've worked with people that have, nearly ground their teeth down into nothing.
The teeth grinding is hard for me. Yeah.
And I've had people with chronic debilitating daily seizures, and in 3 sessions, they were, mostly free of them. I had one gal who was attacked by a Rottweiler, had to go through 6 jaw surgeries, was living in pain and fear of losing more teeth. She had developed a choking disorder. Every time she ate, she was at risk of going to the hospital. Her husband contacted me and says,
Wait, what's a choking disorder? Like her body would instinctually go into choking?
Yep,
or...
and she'd have to go to the ER.
Every time she ate food?
She was at risk of that.
Okay.
Not every single time, but
like an anaphylactic type shock?
it was a reflex that had developed as a result
That's
of this
crazy.
whole pain, fear syndrome.
Yeah.
And her husband contacted me and said, can you help her? And I said, bring her in. 2 sessions, she didn't have that problem anymore. So she's on my YouTube channel. Her name's Julie. She had 3 young kids. It still does, but they're a little older now. And this was a huge drain on the family, as you can imagine. Another gal that I worked with, Julie Beth, she saw her husband catch on fire. He's fine, but it ignited PTSD, mold, babesia, mast cell inflammation, all very, very tricky things to try to solve. She became allergic to everything but 5 foods. So her world was very, very compressed and very, very fearful. She didn't even want to come see me because this was weird and strange. But her husband said, look, you either have to go to a mental institution or you have to go see Tara. Fortunately, she came to see me.
Yeah, right.
And in the first session, she was able to experience more peace than she had experienced in her entire lifetime. Again, the key and the trick was just to go back to where did these beliefs get
So
installed.
identifying what it is. Exactly,
Yeah, but on
right.
a visceral level. It's not a okay, let's sit down and think,
Yeah,
where did this go? It's
yeah.
like, okay, feel that feeling and then, guiding the subconscious mind almost as if you're in a daydream, where did this get started?
Okay, got it.
What was the origin of this? And then the subconscious mind can just bubble up the answers. It's like people are sitting in a movie theater. They might be thinking, they might be seeing things, they might be hearing things, they might be remembering things. They might just be having sensations in their body. There are no wrong answers. That's the beauty of it. I don't have to figure it out. They don't have to figure out. Again, that's that 5 to 10% of the conscious mind that just isn't that useful. But once we connect to that subconscious mind that is, running trillions of bits of information, we're able to get deeper, faster results.
This sounds like a personally, I don't want to, like a realization for you. So when you're doing acupuncture, you're minding your own sweet business, you're doing your own thing, and then you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Right. So what did that do in you for your
So
own life?
it's interesting. I love applied kinesiology. So I would often muscle test on people. Is this
Okay.
a mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual problem? 9 times out of 10, it would be a spiritual one, which was really interesting.
Within acupuncture or just
Within
generally?
acupuncture,
Okay,
yeah. And acupuncture does affect the mind, body, and spirit. But I just found that it's so elegant to go into that massive subconscious mind and upgrade the patterns that are stuck. So whether it's somebody not feeling worthy, not feeling confident, I work with people with phobias. I had one gal that was terrified of snakes. If she even saw a picture of a snake show up on her phone, she'd hurl her phone across the room. And, she couldn't go on hikes with her family. She couldn't enjoy the outdoors. She was terrified of a snake showing up. I was thinking, okay, well, did an anaconda, almost eat her when she was a young child?
yeah.
Nothing like that. She was at a school assembly when she was younger, and they had to go and pet a boa constrictor before they left.
Okay.
She was so terrified to have to do that she escaped out of the back of the auditorium and never got anywhere near the snake.
Followed her
But
for the
the
rest of her life.
fear was
Yes.
there. So all we did, we took 2 sessions, we just rewired it, and now she's, going into nature and spending time with her family in the outdoors. I did want to do a 3rd session and, actually bring a snake over, but her lap.
I mean, that is the classic, origin story of Tony Robbins as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, with his NLP, which was pseudoscience until it wasn't, right, and is currently
there's a reason he gets $1 million for 8 hours of his time.
yes, right, or
And I've studied hundreds of hours of his stuff as well. And he knows his stuff. And he says, people think he's a motivational teacher. He says he's not at all. He is a pattern recognizer.
I would say Joe probably would say the same thing as well, right?
Joe Dispenza?
Yeah,
thinks
about himself, right? Well, all of them. Joe Vitale, Joe Dispenza, they're not like rah motivation. They're like identify the weed
Right.
people and pull it out.
Yes.
As Joe always says, right? We don't pray our weeds away, we pull them out. And
Yes.
Joe versus Tony. Tony's more matter to matter, and Joe is more like we're going in there. We're going the quantum
Yeah.
to pull the weed out,
Yeah.
right? And maybe we can shorten the distance.
I know. He gets into quantum physics, which is a whole...
To the non-initiated, it's like,
It's- yeah.
you know, right?
But it's fun. You have to admit it's really fun.
It is really fun. And the thought experiments that are now no longer thought experiments is what caught my attention. Like I said, when Arturo Enriquez, who has done very well for himself, is like, I met Joe when he was in excruciating pain. He was suffering, his words, he was suffering like I've never seen a human suffer before, but he was still radiant, right? And he's like, no, this is not woo woo. Like there's nothing about buying a plumbing business that's woo woo. The guy wants his toilet fixed, right? And he's just done this in so many industries that's where it's like wild to me to just see how this has come full circle, right? So even in that snake story for Tony Robbins, I mean, what did he do? He challenged a therapist who quite literally wouldn't release his client, right? She had a snake phobia for like 8 years, and it's like, why are you still going to therapy for 8 years? I can do it in one session. And it was like, boom, bring her with me.
And what he did was she had a neurological pattern, snake fear, snake fear, snake fear, and they were cemented together. So what does he do? He comes along and he radically changes her state. Because in order to get those neurons to separate, it takes energy. So he radically changes her state, and then he fires and wires completely different patterns.
Yes. Yeah. And he did bring a snake out. So that was
Yeah,
like
no,
your
no.
third desire, which is probably in the back of your mind. Like, are you always...
Well, and I always work with people that have an 8, 9, or a 10 need to change and an 8, 9, or 10 commitment to change, because it does take that. Because when the brain is stressed, it wants to, watch television, drink a beer, and fall asleep.
Is that a denial or avoidance? Is that what that is?
No, it's just familiar. It's the brain wants to save energy, and it's just so energy saving to default to what's familiar. It is and it isn't, because if what's familiar is horrible, that can be really costing a lot
And
of
draining, right?
when people have constant anxiety, when those alarm bells are going off in the brain all the time, even though externally everything's fine, but their alarm systems are going off, that's exhausting. And it's so destructive to the tissues in the body. There's a guy named Hans Selye, who famous scientist, I think 1950s, but he did all this research, and it showed that if you're in chronic stress, it's depleting your energy and it's destroying the cells in your body. So it really is it's not physiologically a good place to be.
So what would be the first thing that people needed to do? Because you had mentioned like this isn't an analytical process of we sit down, where is the pain, which is much more where therapy is based.
So when somebody contacts me, if they go on my website, consulttara.com, there's a button, Let's Talk. Just fill out like 10 questions. And I do that for clarity purposes. So you can see, oh, okay, this is how long I've been struggling with this. This is what it's costing me mentally, emotionally, physically. So you can just get really clear on, what this energy challenge is for you. And then when I'm on a Zoom call with them, I like to ask them, what are 3 feelings that you'd give anything to not feel anymore?
To not feel anything anymore? Like go numb? What do you mean?
Nope. What are 3 feelings you would give anything to not feel anymore?
You mean like I would give anything to not feel bitter anymore?
That's a good one.
Okay.
Yeah, resentment would be a good one.
Okay.
Bitterness. Typically, I get things like anxious,
Okay.
fearful, unworthy. What are other popular ones? It could be a phobia of something. I get people with eating issues where they are just eating sugar all the time. I've had literally people with lifelong sugar addictions gone in one session, and that's also on my YouTube channel and on my podcast. Yeah. So then I ask them, well, where do you feel that in your body?
And just hypothetically, for some reason, I'm feeling it right here.
You particularly are.
No.
Oh,
I'm saying hypothetically.
Usually, almost always, it's in the gut, it's in the
Okay.
stomach, it's in
Okay.
the heart, it's in the head. It's usually on the midline. It's.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever had anybody say it's in my shoulder or my.
Okay.
Although sometimes, people that have like terrible shoulder issues, I get people with their traps are just locked up. I've had many people that just have chronic tight traps, either right side, left side, and in just a couple of sessions, that's loosened up nicely, because it's just it's that subconscious mind going danger, 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 better get tight, better get ready, better get, gotta fight, you gotta hide, you gotta, and when you're in that state of fight or flight where, that's the 4 F's: fight, flee, freeze, or fawn. The fawning are the people pleasers. Some people just, they have to be people pleasing all the time. And it's because they were trained, if you don't keep the person in your environment happy, all hell's gonna break loose. So they're the people pleasers, and that's unhealthy. It's just, again, the alarm bells are going off constantly. So if your alarm system is highly active and you're living in fear, panic, you're not fully operational with your digestive system, your hormonal system, and your immune system. That's the parasympathetic immune. So one of the magical things that I find with this work is that it dials people out of the sympathetic into the parasympathetic so that they can have the digestive juices flowing, their hormonal functioning happening, their immune system happening. So I can't tell you how many people I worked with that had regular, sometimes even daily panic attacks, who just in 2-3 sessions don't have them anymore.
Is that typical? That's typical then. If you say
Yeah,
how many-
those are that is definitely on the typical side.
So what I'm hearing about this is to have breakthrough is significantly closer than most people realize.
The subconscious mind, in my experience, is incredibly powerful. And just by slowing the brainwave states down, having that conversation where you're connected to the subconscious mind, you can leverage it so that it can see it once it can see, oh, I picked that up as an iPhone 4. I keep using the iPhone analogy because people understand that technology. Once it can see, oh, I'm not an iPhone 4 anymore and I'm holding on to a hot poker. That's hurting me. It's damaging me. It's destroying my relationships, my finances, my health, whatever, fill in the blank. Then it'll be willing to drop that. It's almost like, when the curtain got pulled back in The Wizard of Oz and all of a sudden this big, scary, billowing thing was just a wizened old man pulling levers.
Yeah.
Once the subconscious mind can see that, it'll be willing to transition to what it really is.
Okay.
Rather than what it thought it was. It's very much like looking under the bed and looking for the monster.
Okay. Okay. No, that makes total sense, right? Because belief lie, right? So identifying what that even is probably the hardest part. And then once you do, adjusting.
I've worked with several military guys who had, PTSD symptoms. One of them had 100 on his PTSD scores. He had gone through all the military stuff. He was still having panic attacks, still not able to focus on his work. And after 2 sessions, he just said, it can't be this easy because I'm not having my panic attacks anymore. And I'm like, yeah, it actually can be.
So how long are these sessions?
Takes about 2 hours each time. It's almost like going in for dental work, though. You don't really want it to be a long time. You just want to go in, get the job done, and get out. Because it takes a certain amount of energy to face fears that you've never faced before. And I do love to demystify it because the fear of living with the garbage that you're living with is so much worse than the quote unquote fear of, again, looking under the bed and going, oh, there really isn't a monster under there.
Yeah. Part of the reason why I asked like how long. If it's 2 sessions, let's just pretend it's 3 sessions.
I work with somebody for 90 days. So it's 3 sessions over 90 days.
Okay.
I create the audio tape that's unique to them so that they listen to that each and every night as they fall off to sleep. It's only about 10 minutes long. They don't even need to be awake. Your subconscious mind will hear it. I give them a high performance planner to track their progress in between because it's really important to notice what's shifting and changing in the direction. I cannot tell you how many people I've worked with that before I sort of developed my whole system, I'd help them with something that was their big issue. What's coming to mind is a realtor that never felt comfortable. She says, I said, well, I'm giving you a magic wand. What do you want to resolve? She says, well, I'd really like to not second guess myself in every single social situation. Now, as a realtor, that's kind of a big deal. So we went back and I knew she had had a challenging childhood. And so I was not surprised when all this stuff came up and we just rewired it because there were just false beliefs that she, when you're raised with insanity, but a lot of us, raise your hand if you had perfect parents.
Yeah, right. I know. Right.
But if mom or dad really, was narcissistic or alcoholic or physically abusive or whatever, we can pick up really bad thoughts about ourselves. So we just rewired that. I called her up a couple of months later and I said, oh, and she had been really avoiding me. It's like she wasn't calling me back. I'm like, okay, look, if you didn't listen to the audio, fine. If it didn't help you, fine. I just need an answer. On a scale of 1 to 10, how big is that issue for you now? And she's paused for a minute and she says, oh, yeah, it's gone. I guess it was 100% effective.
You're like, wow, thanks for the reflection there, right? Wow.
But again, that is not the first time. I've had multiple people that, a month or 2 later, they're like, oh yeah, that's gone.
That thing. Yeah, right.
But it's so funny how the mind works because, and there's this wonderful book called The Gap and the Gain, which I love people to be aware of because if you're only focused on the horizon, if that's the only point you're focused on, when do you ever get there?
Yeah, never.
Never get there.
Never.
It's a great, it's like the North Star. It's a great guiding point. It helps you move from where you are. But if you don't look behind you and give yourself credit for where you've come, then your nervous system never gets that acknowledgement. I always say the nervous system is like a puppy dog. And if you just take a newspaper and beat a puppy dog all the time, what kind of a dog do you get? You know, it whimpers in the corner. It doesn't know what to do. It's neurotic. Well, if you're treating your nervous system that way, you're going to get a neurotic, you know, shy, scared puppy dog. But if you praise the puppy dog for 99% of the stuff it does, you know, you can tell it not to chew on the furniture and stuff like that. But if you praise it, then it'll and it'll do anything for you. So the nervous system is much like that. If you know, give it clear directions and then you praise it most of the time, then it'll be that puppy dog that's waving its tail all the time and eager to do anything for you. But you have to give it that proper instruction rather than the beating it with the newspaper all the time. And in our society, there's just so much self-criticism, there's so much shame, there's so much blame, and that is very costly.
Costly to ourselves as well as everybody else.
Yeah.
What do you see as one of the biggest things that, okay, so 95 subconscious, 5% conscious.
Yeah, roughly.
Right. So aside from the fact that your conscious mind is probably the number one thing stopping you from these adjustments. Okay, so biologically, throw that off to the side. Emotionally, right? What do you think is the thing? We've talked about acupuncture. We've talked about Joe Dispenza's work, Tony Robbins' work. I even casually mentioned Joe Vitale, which, by the way, you also interviewed. So
I
go
did.
check that out.
I was very excited about that. We
right?
talked about the Ho'oponopono prayer. And actually, that's another really powerful tool because it's so simple. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. It captures so much. It captures appreciation by thank you. I'm sorry. You just, you know, basically, you know, you're throwing down your fighting mechanisms and just saying, look, if I've offended you in any way, I'm sorry. Surrender. I love you. You're opening up the heart center. Powerful.
It's funny about the Ho'oponopono thing. It's even for like evangelicals, that is the framework of the Lord's Prayer. Just going to leave that there and let anyone wrestle with that if they would like to. But that is the basic framework of what Jesus had laid out is, I'm sorry, I love you.
Truth is
please
truth
forgive
is
me.
truth. Isn't it funny how it keeps propping up?
Exactly, 100%. But we just mentioned like all these different tools and all this different stuff and then hypnotherapy. And for some reason, people won't pick up what all these amazing people are putting down. Or some people won't pick up what all these amazing people are putting down. What do you think is holding most people back? I'll give you an example to preface this. The conversation of like UAPs or UFOs or aliens, for the longest time, what was holding people back was the social scrutiny, which is finally being lifted. The reasons behind that, we could debate all day, and I'm sure everyone and their brother has their own opinion. In terms of these conversations of self-development in this realm, which is more than just go work out more, what is holding people back from picking this up?
Well, we are very tribal in nature. There's a great study called the ASH study. And in it, there was a subject participant. There were like 4 of them, and their job was to pick out the middle length line. And unbeknownst to the main test subject, the people that were surrounding him were actually part of the experiment. They weren't, you know, they were in on the gag, but the gag was the other ones started identifying the wrong line. I mean, it was very simple. There was a short line, a medium line, and a long line. But the other people in the study started identifying the wrong line kind of together in unison, and it started freaking the test subject out. And the test subject would agree with the others just so that they weren't standing up. So even though they knew, okay, I'm looking at the lines and that's the middle length line, they would agree with the other ones. So they would go along just to get along. They would go against their own senses in order to go along. So that's a really important one to understand human nature. In the past, for tens of thousands of years, we were tribal, and if you were rejected by your tribe, that meant being sent out in the wilderness. You know, you would be eaten by animals or captured by a neighbor. It was a big deal. It was the end of your life. So our cells remember that.
Quinton wouldn't have made it. There's no way. No way. Zero way.
Our cells remember that. There was an animal study where they, you know, exposed mice to the shock and the blossoms scent. And of course, you know, it wasn't that long before they just were exposed to the scent, and they would. Yeah. But what was interesting is that the children had the same effect, and then the children's children had an effect. It took 3 generations to bleed that away. So you can only imagine what we've picked up.
One trauma, not a lifetime of trauma, just the one from the study.
From once the neurological signals from the electricity and the smell got wired into the parent, that without any electrical signal got passed on to the child and to the child and to the children's children. So 3 generations, all they had to do was give them the blossom smell, and the nervous system would feel the electricity.
The jolt from it.
So
Okay.
you can only imagine what we've picked up from our ancestors.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
it takes 3 generations in a mouse for such a simple connection to bleed away, all the fear we have tribally, that if we're rejected by our tribe, so that means don't stand out.
Yeah. Right. Tall poppy syndrome. I mean, every culture has a different version of this. The Japanese, the nail that sticks out gets the hammer. The UK is tall poppy syndrome. Also in Australia, tall poppy syndrome. Right. I think America is one of the most unique places that has, up until recently, cherished that idea.
Yeah, of the
Right.
Lone Ranger, the one that goes out from the
100%.
Yeah.
But even now, that's slowly shifting.
So that's one, and the other thing is humans, we kind of fall asleep. We become unaware, and so to me, this process is about waking up. And part of that is going within and slaying the inner dragon, because as Joe says, if he can do that first thing in the morning for an hour or two, if he can deal with him first, then everything else is easy.
So how do you deal with you? How does Dr. Tara deal with Dr. Tara?
Well, I've done 9 Dr. Joe events.
There's one way, you could go. Guys, again, if you've never been, that doesn't mean anything to you. If you've been to even one, to hear 9, or some of these people that have more or less, and even like 2 or 3, it's intense. And you hear the story of the linguist who comes, who has no words to describe what is happening.
Yeah.
I now tell the story rather than try to tell about it. Because I'm just like, he can't. I'm telling you, there really is no words. I can give you anecdotal stories or like memories, like this happened and that's awesome and that happened, but you can't really describe. Why do you meditate every day?
I would say for some amount of time. It's not like I do an hour every day, but pretty much every day before I go to bed, I spend time in meditation, just because I like that centering feeling.
Even
and then
that.
and then sometimes I wake up at 4 a.m. and spend an hour meditating. Or
You're like, how do you tell why? You're just sitting there by yourself.
it's like
You're just
like
thinking.
rebooting your computer. It feels good.
It does feel
So
good,
other things that
yes.
I've done, I mean, I've got into ice bathing. So, I'd fill up my bathtub with 50 pounds of ice and get in. And again, that's when you do that, you have total mental mind control. I mean, not total, but I mean, you're elevating it.
So Dr. Tara, on a daily basis, how do you give yourself that mental mind control?
Meditation, just mindfulness, just bringing yourself back to the present moment, not getting sucked off into the past, in the future. And you just start to be aware of your emotions. Where, are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling, where is your heart rate elevated? Is it down? Are you heading towards stress and cortisol? Are you heading towards relaxation and wellness? Where are you at on that graph?
Where do you want to be? We had a podcast before the podcast.
We did.
Okay? So forgive me, but where do you want to be in the next 3 to 5?
I love the idea of being in flow. I just interviewed Jamie Wheel of the Flow Genome Project.
Classic.
Him and Stephen Kotner, and they're looking at, again, elevated levels of consciousness. You're able to just have a better experience of life. You're less asleep. Life is more magical. There's more coincidences that beautifully show up in your world. You feel like you're on target with what you should be doing, and that feels good.
So then that begs the question, what do you feel you should be doing? Other than the cheating answer of exactly what I'm doing right now.
Well, if I were to look at my life now versus 5 years ago, I would say pinch me. I feel so lucky to be doing this. I want to continue to be effective in helping others get from where they are to where they want to go, because that feels good to me. It feels like my purpose is being fulfilled when I'm doing that, and that feels great. I like having balance in my life. I'm not a workaholic. I love nature. I like, animals and deer and my chickens, my cat, and my friends. I love interesting other people to network with and to connect them. It's just, I feel like we're in this soup of consciousness. And as you elevate in that, it's an enjoyable experience. I want to make the most of, I feel like life is a real gift. Consciousness is a real gift. And the way you say thank you for that is to make the most of it.
I would agree with that completely. One thing I told you a little bit about how me and my wife met, because I'm not like super public about everything all day, every day. But one of the things I think is funny that I talked to Johanna about is, I've shared that I did the whole like, I'm not going to be in a cubicle thing. But what I didn't mention was we have this saying that we've always said, and we got it from a couple that we love and replicate in a lot of ways when we met in the UK. But maybe people can look and say that's foolish, or maybe that's happy-go-lucky, but they will never say boring. They will never say boring ever.
Well, I grew up in a family that wasn't boring, and that would be intolerable to me.
Right? I met people from abroad walking in here. By the way, you didn't just like welcome me, you literally welcomed me in your house, so like thank you.
Well, and then again, coincidentally, and I don't think that was coincidental, that
Did you plan it?
A super cool person that I know just happened to be here for like half a day, and you guys crossed paths.
And what he's doing, I'm incredibly, for months, been researching, if not years, and diving into because of economic and so many different things. But it's just one of those things where you're like, did she plan that? I don't know, right? But you're obviously living a very unorthodox, very cool life, right? And
thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Here, how about this?
Here's to cool unorthodox.
Yeah, right? Never boring, right? That's kind of my life motto. Never boring. But where do you want to take this? I mean, where do you want to see it? Do you see yourself having your own retreats or anything?
Well, maybe. There's different retreat centers that I'm sort of getting affiliated with in various places around the world, and I'd like to see that grow and continue.
I think that would provide, just to praise you in that regard, I think it would provide such a unique angle to this environment and this work, right? Whereas like, I think everyone fits into their own piece of the puzzle. And I know we hear that, and then people let that slip by without the actual implications of that. And I had done that too for about 7 years. What do I mean by that? Let's like bring this really practical down to earth. Tony Robbins is a giant physically. And it's like the puzzle piece that he's not a pull the weed out. He's a rip the weed out of the ground freak of nature, in his own words, right? He had the tumor.
Yeah.
It caused that.
Yeah.
But he fit into the puzzle piece of that. Joe Dispenza is in a very similar industry, in a very different, unique, his own way. He is a much more demystifying the mystical, but it's still science and it's still rooted in meditation. He's doing Kundalini breath exercises without calling it that. It is what it is, right?
I know.
But he fits in his own puzzle. And one thing I was caught off guard by being there was his humility and his beautiful tap dance of humility, because he's very sure of himself, and it's not a false humility, but he does so well of fitting into to stay in his lane, to know his own role. This perspective of hypnotherapy, right, as a practice in this side, yes, there are hypnotherapists and whatnot, and then there's NLP with Tony Robbins, who's much more of the freak of nature giant, and then there's the demystifying the mystical with Tony Robbins, and then they have more of the, I'm going to say, people that do lean the woo-woo, that don't have the self-control, and that's not to knock on anyone, but you got to admit, Joe has some serious self-control to hold back certain things that I'm sure he would love to either share or give opinions on, but he's like, all right, the data's pointing to this. For you, I don't see anyone in this space doing this in that perspective of hypnotherapy, if that makes any sense.
I agree. I don't know anybody doing this.
Right.
I know. There are people that do pieces of it.
Yeah, exactly. That's yes.
But I do think I'm kind of unique in the way these puzzle pieces fell together.
Right? And I don't know. I just think that there's an industry and then there's players in the industry. And it's like, not very often do you see that uniqueness, if that makes any sense, in an industry that is quote, so saturated, right? But when you have that, you're like, but it's not theory. It's not woo woo. I've been doing this for years. On top of it, I'm not getting trapped in my own ideology. I'm still going to these other cats and learning from these other cats because I know that they have something to contribute and I'm not Jesus, right? Like,
Well, the whole mystery of life is so magnificent and so big. I mean, how can you stop learning?
fair, right? So where do you get most of your learning from?
Well, I have a endless. I have a platinum Audible.
Yeah, right. I know.
How long have you? How many books have I brought out since you've just been
Oh,
here?
it's great. It's usually people give the same suggestions, which is why I started asking guests. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
So,
give me 3
okay,
books.
Byron Katie, I love her.
Okay.
She wrote "Loving What Is," fabulous book. She had enlightenment hit her in an instant. She was sleeping on a floor in a halfway house, and a cockroach crawls up her leg, and somewhere between wake and sleep, she experiences enlightenment. She starts to understand how her brain works, and she taught her method, which I mean, I constantly recommend her book, and I use her little simple technique many times. Who else? David Hawkins, I love. He's the one that took muscle testing to a wonderful level and muscle tested the energy on all kinds of things. Gosh, who else do I love? There's several that I'm quoting all the time. Some of them I just quoted in this interview already. Gap in the gain, I think, is really important because, again, I think you've got to give credit to your nervous system for what you've accomplished, because if you're constantly beating yourself up for what you haven't done yet, then your nervous system never gets the signal that it's doing a good job.
What would he say? How would someone relieve that? Asking for a friend.
A friend?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know, a friend.
It's very simple. You look back every, couple of months and you go, oh, wow, this is where I was 2 months ago. And this is where I am now. And look at all I did in that time.
Just actually taking time to reflect.
Yeah,
on what has
appreciating it.
happened.
Who was it? Somebody, I don't know if it was Tony Robbins or Brandon Burchard, I think it was.
Okay.
Another super great guy with amazing data, Forbes 500 companies. One of the things he does with his people that are, sometimes you have CEOs running companies that are miserable and feeling depressed and out of gas. And it's because they just didn't look behind them and take inventory of all of the miracles that they performed in the last 2 decades of their life.
I just thought of this. Tell me if it's a terrible metaphor and just cut me off, but it's almost like when you're running, I do long distance running, and you're running a 5K or you're running it doesn't even matter the distance. You just ran farther than you've ever run at that point in the race. So you're at mile 26 of a marathon. I think, 27.2 or something. But for whatever reason, you get that second wind because like, I'm almost there. I'm really close. In sales or marketing, over 40% of sales happen within the last 3 hours, even if you've run the promotion for 2 weeks, right? So a little hint there for everybody that has teams: you can stack your sales team based on the data of knowing when most of the sales will be. So you don't need all of them for the whole 2 weeks because for whatever reason, it happens every single time, right? So in that regard, is that kind of what you mean by like stop, recognize where you are, accept it, and maybe you'll get some form of second wind to actually realize like you've grown. Look at that.
Well, that's a great marketing metaphor. I like that.
This is part of the journey.
Again, it's the awareness of that. A lot of high achievers got to be high achievers because they have very high standards. But if all you do is have increasingly high standards and you don't recognize and celebrate what you've accomplished. Another thing I did was firewalking. So the longest thing that I walked on was 100 feet.
Fire? Wait, what is this? The
Coals.
Coals thing? Like this?
100 feet of freshly raked coals.
How and why and what's up? I know Tony does that for his events, but
I know it's great. It's a way to, again, realize that you're not your body, and that if you are focused on the end point, You don't even feel the coals beneath your feet.
Is it real? Is it real? Is that a thing?
In my opinion, yes, because I did it correctly and I did it incorrectly. And when you do it incorrectly, you get blisters on your feet.
How do you do it correct? What does correctly mean?
Correctly means you focus
The
on
mental
you
state?
you are already at the end of it. You have celebrated it. You've done it successfully.
So every step that you're taking, okay, because there's a lot of relevance here for both my friend and others.
Your friend, wink, wink, wink.
Yeah, me. There's a lot of relevance here. Yeah, it's like surprise. What are you doing as you're taking these steps? You're continuously imagining that you're there already. This is what I meant. By
Okay, so in
future
martial
pacing, by the
arts,
way. Okay.
if you're breaking a board, you don't focus on the board. You focus past
Past
the
the
board.
board, yeah.
So you've already completed it. This
Okay.
is quantum physics.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like
Okay.
Dr. Joe, if you can celebrate and be in the state of what you want, then you become a vibrational match for it, and it can't help but show up. That is law of attraction 101, and it's real.
In terms of biology, when you're even walking on fire.
All I can tell you is I've done it correctly and I've done it incorrectly. Okay, so the second time I did
What was
it,
the difference?
I got it.
Yeah.
I got in my head and I thought, well, maybe this, maybe you were lucky the first time, or maybe this isn't really real, or whatever. So I'm walking across the coals, and right at the end, I look down at my feet on the coals, burned.
And jump off, I'm assuming.
Well, I was at the end of it anyway.
Okay.
And yes, I mean, it was painful, and I had a blister on my foot. I got so mad at myself, I went back to the beginning of the line. I did it again. I did it exactly the way I was supposed to do it, and I didn't feel a thing. But I'd already burned my feet, so.
So it's just losing. I mean, you saw this even with Peter jumping out of the boat. He was focused on Jesus, right? And then he looked down and looked around at the storm and then sank, and Jesus had to grab him.
There you go.
So you see this repetition of this concept, right? Okay, so I have asked everybody I can.
Okay, so here's another really great example. They're looking at the cells with cancer, and they're doing healing on the cells with cancer.
The coherence healing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're showing that the
Now,
cells.
again, real quick. For the uninitiated, it is what it is. If you're a Christian, it's the laying of the hands. If you're not, you're...
There's no religion involved with this.
Yeah, not at all. It's
This
all
is just
data.
science. Because we did this back at UC Irvine when I was doing pranic healing.
Yeah.
Same thing.
You're healing people with your mind, but
we would
through
do the healing on the HeLa cells, and the two sets of HeLa cells would get irradiated. The ones that didn't have the healing, they all died for the most part, and the ones that got the healing, most of them lived.
You see how to the uninitiated, it's like, yeah. But I know it's data. I know.
But
I know.
what's
I know.
cool about it is you can actually, in fact, here's an experiment. I haven't done it yet, but I know people who have done it, and they said it was amazing. It blew their mind. But take an apple, slice it in half, take one half and put it under glass in one room, same temperature, another room with another glass. Obviously, it's got to be the same temperature, not exposed to light, or it's got to be the same circumstances. Go to one of them and just speak horrible things to it. Tell it how awful it is. You just send hate and spew to it. The next one you love, and oh my gosh, you're just the most special apple ever. I'm so appreciative. Send it all your love, and just notice which one ages faster.
That's
Then there's the guy that did the experiment, the Japanese guy with the water.
So I was going to say that. It's really interesting. When I brought that up to my wife, who's Japanese, she's actually Okinawan, whatever. She was like, "Yeah, we learned about that in school. Like it's normal. But it's not woo woo. It's normal." And she was like, "Oh, I know exactly what they're going to say."
And it really shouldn't be woo woo. It should just be
Data.
science.
It's science and data, right? So, okay. Go back to the fire coals and the healings. I was just trying to say, like, you can see from their perspective. You're like, what are you talking?
So I'm at a bunch of this 100 feet of coals, and they've raked it freshly right before I was supposed to walk on it, because they do that periodically.
And you can feel the heat before you walk. It's hot. You're
glowing.
Okay.
Orange. Okay. And I thought, okay, I'm going to ace this. And I just focused at the end. I was already celebrating before I even started. Walked it, didn't rush it, and didn't feel a thing. Got to the end, wiped my feet off, and, But here, and this is the reason I brought this up, because we were talking about the gap in the game. We were back in the room. It was Harvecker that did this event. He was like a Tony Robbins. And he said to the group, he says, if you're not celebrating right now, if you're already on to the next thing that you need to be accomplishing, that's your problem.
Interesting.
And I was one of those people.
What do you mean by that? Like,
I wasn't celebrating. I was already on to the next thing. So I wasn't giving my nervous system the opportunity to celebrate what I had just done.
And then reset. Okay, I see what you're saying.
It's really important.
I see. Okay.
Because again, you want to train that neural pathway that says you have different thoughts, you have different behaviors, you have different outcomes. The outcomes are better. And then you have to celebrate that so that it becomes a circle and it becomes a self-perpetuating thing.
So after you just walked on those coals, you were already thinking about what the next thing is. How is that even possible? You just walked on coals, but you figured out a way to do
I
it.
was already figuring out again.
Yeah.
And this is a high achiever thing. It's like you never feel whole. You never feel good enough. You're always looking for the next thing, which is okay to a point.
Okay.
But if you want to feel satisfied, you have to be able to switch to the other hat
And recognize the win when it comes.
and celebrate and be, have a drink with your friends and laugh and play and.
Yeah.
It's all balance.
So I'm trying to figure this out here. Act as if, right? Whether it's Joe Vitale, Joe Dispenza.
Yep.
Even
It's feel the feeling ahead. It used to be seeing is believing. Now it's believing is seeing.
yes. So how does one feel what they already have? And I'm trying to think of how to explain it because
Ahead of it actually appearing in the outside world.
not just that. So how do you want something, but you're supposed to already have it and feel that you already have it?
That's a great question. So say you want a relationship.
Because you can't feel separate from it. The relationship, a car, whatever, right?
Right.
Job.
So if you're in the wanting of it, you're creating the separation.
Yep.
And this is easier said than done because, again, most of this is subconscious, which is below the level of your consciousness.
Yes.
So you kind of have to trick your brain to feel the experience of having what you want. You have to live that. For example, Jack Canfield, who was a famous guy in this arena,
Success principles.
Yeah, I mean, he was like Mr. Law of Attraction back in the day. He would have parties on the Queen Mary with his buddies, and they'd all pretend they had already written the best-selling book way ahead of having done it, so that they could be in the vibration of that, and that they were a vibrational match for that.
So play pretend.
Experience the joy, wholeness.
That's a good reframing there, by the way.
Yeah.
Play pretend, but no, experience.
Yeah, experience it ahead of the happening, and then you're a vibrational match for it. It can't help but show up.
So I mean, do you do this within your own life?
Sure.
Like, I don't know, help me. Give me an example, like one example.
Well, I was just showing you the book of a guy that I interviewed
Lot of
recently.
books.
Yeah, he wrote The Creation Frequency, a little tiny book.
Yep.
And
Somebody I would love to connect with.
Yep,
right?
he was totally broke and alcoholic, and wife had kicked him out. He was at the bottom rung of the bottom rung. He meets the guy called the Mystery Man, who in 7 one-hour sessions, one a week apart, teaches him the law of attraction. And really, really simple. It's just you write a script in present tense, full of juicy, wonderful language, appreciating and celebrating having accomplished what it is that you want to accomplish. And again, it's quantum physics. If you go out of space-time and into time-space, and when you have that degree of coherence, you're able to pull that to you faster than you would if it was just in 3D. 3D takes a long time, takes a lot of effort. It's just mechanical. Whereas if you're moving into a vibrational match, you're able to attract that to you faster than you could in 3D.
So by the way, is this the life script is this where Bob Proctor got the life script that he always talks about? It just sounds very similar to that.
I don't think so. I think this is unique to Mike Murphy.
Okay, I'll have that book in Okinawa before I even get land.
But it's just the principle is the same as the same as the same, and you can do it in different ways. You can record your own voice saying the script, putting it into binaural beats.
For me, I've done a few different things. So I have made. That's not true. Yes, I've made my own audio recordings, talking to myself, different things. But
so have I, by the way.
Okay.
I mean, so you asked me how I do it. I mean, that's one way. Going into complete coherence and meditation. Nobody, nowhere, no space, and no time. When you can achieve that state, and then you just think the juicy, happy thoughts of whatever it is you want, then it again. When I go to a Dr. Joe event now, the coincidences that happen, it's like daily.
Yeah. I could only, right. Every break.
I mean,
is a
you
new one.
coming here and just dovetailing with another friend of mine that I knew you guys were going to hit it off.
Yes. Hopefully, I mean, anyway, who knows where that'll go.
It's just after a while, you can't think it's an accident.
Yeah. No, you can't. I can tell you, even when I get to my family is from Nashville, so that's why it all lined up. When I see people today and tell them, like, yeah, he's building properties X, Y, and Z location, they know that I've been talking about this quite like a lot. And I haven't been very secretive about it. I want to be respectful, right, of everybody. They're going to be like, really, bro? Like, what the heck, right? And that's real. The synchronicities are unexplainable. I know for me, whenever I've done any type of life scripts, I've found it, or I've read them on a daily basis and whatnot. I have found it really hard to care. This sounds weird.
No, that's
like
true.
a numbness with it.
You know what?
Okay.
It has to be. That's where the art and the science comes in. I think it's got to be that juicy language so that when you read it, you feel good.
And I've never been able to write where I feel. I don't know. I feel from the neck up or right.
And that's why if you could record it and then put binaural beats in it
Okay.
and then listen to it as you're drifting off to sleep when your brain waves are starting to slow down,
Okay.
that'll be more powerful.
Is there any element of it
'Cause
where
if you're trying to stuff it into your brain when you're in beta like we are right now, that's really tough.
Is there any element where it's like it's not something you truly even want? It's probably something you're chasing that you don't even care about? Therefore,
Yes, if you have written something that you think is, your mother wants it, your society wants it, you have some expectation that's really is not authentically you, then you're going to have a hard time materializing that.
Some of the hard part for me for all of this has always been trying to think of how to word this in a very humble way, in a non-grandiose way. But like there have been people that I've had the opportunity, privilege, blessing, whatever word you want to use, to meet. Some of them are hundreds of millions of dollars and billionaires and so on. And I don't mean this in like a self-righteous way. I just have never cared. I am significantly more impressed by who that person has become to get there and what the gap was from them starting in X, Y, and Z to get there, because they're a different human, just like the 7-day retreat, biologically a different human, than I am with the stuff or the thing, if that makes sense.
You're interested in the hero's journey.
So for me, it's always been tough. How do you write that in a life script form? Because you have to have some form of milestone, or like looking at the horizon, you have to see the timeline of what has happened or transpired. How do I write that when I'm reading that I actually care? So for example, again, cool. I'm not a car person. I like watches. It's just like one of the few things that I like actually really like, and it's not for anyone else. It's purely for me. But if I'm writing about watches, there's not like, it is significantly more important to me about the person I'm becoming to get that than I care about the watch.
Exactly.
Or the
So if
Ferrari.
you're writing about watches, it's not gonna.
So how do I reword those things to get that out of myself?
Well, whatever the juicy thing is that turns you on. So if it's feeding a population of a poor country, or curing cancer, or
one of the things, as you said this,
or making housing for people that don't have putting housing for children that don't have food to eat and schools to go to, people helping a village that they spend half of their life getting clean water.
One of the things that happened at the retreat, as you said this, it popped into my head, was the dinner that they had, the donation dinner. I want to be in those rooms and sit with those people and have the conversations at the dinner and whatnot. The numbers don't care, right? That's not important to myself. It is significantly more important to meet the researchers and sit with Joe and be like, man, which is partly why this show is a thing in the first place, is because I'm significantly less interested in what you have, right? Technically what you do, but it's more to me about like who you have become, which has led you to what you do, and what this process of you doing what you do has turned you into, if that makes sense.
100%.
Meaning I like people. Right, if that makes sense.
Well, it doesn't. Your soul doesn't feel good by having a nice watch. Your soul feels good by making.
I don't know. Watches are a nice car.
Not that you can't have your watch.
No, yeah. So how do you personally? How do you pull this out of yourself? And then I'm gonna settle down, and then we can end this thing. Wait, how do you pull this out of yourself?
Well, again, it's that juicy thing that really feels good to your soul. And finding out what
feels good to your soul. What is your thing?
Currently, it's helping people. I feel like I get to let people out of prison for a living. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I
totally
can't tell you
imagine.
how many times at the end of a session I've got a big grin on my face and I go, isn't that fun? Because they've just unlocked something that they've been carrying around. It's like they've dropped a 150-pound backpack they've been carrying around. And when you see that also reverberate into, I don't know, better quality of life, making more money, better health, better relationships, that turns me on. And, 5 years from now, there might be something else on the horizon.
Right? Sicily. Italian wine. I don't know. You never know.
Yeah.
Right? Latin American, tall, brown, and handsome. Anyway, so thank you for sitting down with me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Really fun getting to know you.
Absolutely. Obviously, you can find Dr. Tara everywhere and whatnot. Look.
On Instagram, Dr. Tara Perry. My YouTube channel, Dr. Tara Perry or Dr. Tara Grace Perry, one of those two.
Very nice. Is there anything specific that you would like?
And Next Level Healing is my podcast on all platforms.
There it is. Next Level Healing, where she gets herself into trouble. And this is mine, where I get myself in trouble. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
This podcast is intended for the purpose of providing information and education. It does not provide advice and is not meant to be used for any self-diagnosis or the replacement of any kind of licensed professional. The creators and individuals appearing here do not endorse any specific tests, positions, medications, products, or procedures. The views and opinions are expressed in this podcast are of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.